بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Dear students in Human Resource Management class, welcome everybody to Al-Isra University e-learning. In this presentation I will be presenting the last part of chapter 6, Selecting Employees. And I will be explaining about 3 main points. These points are making the selection decision and evaluating the selection process, and then the last section or the last learning objective of this chapter is making a job offer. Okay. Making the selection decision. Once you have done all your testing and checking, the question arises, how do you combine all this information and make a selection decision? As I explained earlier in this chapter, the selection process is going through many steps and many types of tests, such as tests, interviews, and checking information and background investigation. After these tests and steps have been done, here how we combine all this information or obtained information to make the right decision and to select the best fit person to the position. The process is, and the decision is easy if we only using one predictor or one test. Yes, for example, an applicant for an engineering position should score at least 30 answers correct on some test in order to be appointable as an engineer. If your applicant scores lower, you would not hire him. If it's higher, you probably would. The process here is easy when we use or depend on one predictor and one test. But if we use more than one predictor and more than one step, the process need to go, or you can depend on one of 3 choices. How do you weight all the input in reaching a selection decision? You have 3 basic choices. Firstly, clinical or intuitive judgment approach. In this approach, you intuitively put or weight all the evidence you have about the candidate. Here we mean that intuitively weight all the evidence you have about the candidate and make your decision. بمعنى انه بشكل حدسي او بشكل بديهي نحكم على نعطي وزن معين لهذا الشخص. الخيار الآخر, the second choice is to use statistical or mechanical approach. In statistical approach, we use quantifying information and we use numbers. You collect about the candidate, including, for example, subjective information from references. You then combine all this quantified information, means a quantitative approach, using a formula to predict the candidate's likely job success. And third, you see here, first approach or first choice is intuitive approach. The second is statistical or mechanical approach. The third, you could combine the mechanical result you obtained from your formula with judgment. We could combine the both approaches. While it's ideal to use mechanical statistical approach, a judgmental approach is usually better than nothing. Okay, here for making the selection decision. Now let's move on to evaluating the selection process. There are several aspects to assessing and evaluating how effective one's selection process are. Whether it predicts performance, validity is of course important. Thus, as noted earlier, screening reduced employee tenure and performance. Utility in terms of program's cost versus its saving is important too. One should also streamline the selection process to minimize how long it actually takes to fill a particular position. بمعنى في هذه العملية اللي هي evaluating the selection process ننظر إلى عدة سمات، منها validity المصداقية، منها time to hire how long it takes to fill the particular position. For example, the US government was taking an average 122 days to fill a position. By reviewing each step in its hiring process, it reduced time to hire to about 105 days. Okay, so we evaluate the selection process according to the duration or the how long it takes to fill a position. Time to hire, validity, time to hire, and another aspect is how applicants react to your selection process is another consideration. The consulting firm worked with one client to create phantom applicants. These phantoms then applied to the client's employer and reported on the effectiveness of the employer's selection process. Okay, so it's better to take in consideration how applicants react to your selection process. Okay, now I'll talk about the last part in this chapter, which is developing and extending the job offer, and this is the last learning objective in this chapter. After selecting the candidate to whom an offer is to be made, the employer develops the actual job offer. Here, the job offer is to be made. It will base the offer's financial and other terms on, for instance, the candidate's attractiveness as a prospective employee, the level of the position, the pay rates for similar positions. Okay, next, the employer extends an actual job offer to candidates verbally. Firstly, explain the financial and other terms. candidate attractiveness, a prospective employee, as a prospective employee, the level of the position, and the pay rate for similar positions. Next, the employer extends an actual job offer to candidate verbally. Here the employer points person who might be the person to whom the new employee will report, or the human resource director, for instance, discusses the offer main parameters. Here, in this process, maybe there may be some negotiation between the employer and the person and the applicant. Then, once the agreement is reached, the employer will extend a written job offer. Okay, there are the steps. There are several issues to consider here. Several issues to consider in job offer. Perhaps most important, understand the difference between job offer and contract. There is a difference between job offer and contract. In a job offer, the employer lists an offer, the offer's basic information. In job offer, the employer lists the offer's basic information. This typically starts with a welcome sentence. It then includes job-specific information such as details on salary and pay. Okay, welcome sentence, details on salary and pay, benefits information, paid leave information, and terms of employment, including, for instance, successful completion of job testing and physical exams. Crucially, there should be a strong statement specifying that the employment relationship is at will. Yes, at will. There is then a closing statement. This again welcomes the employee, mentions who the employer's point person should be if any questions arise, and instructs the candidate to sign the letter if it is acceptable. These are the information included in the job offer. On the other hand, in hiring for many positions, such as executives, a contract might be in order. In contrast to letter of offer or offer letter, which should always be at will. Yes, at will tense. It is not unusual for an employment contract to specify duration, such as 3 years. Given this, the contract will also describe grounds for termination or re-assignation and servants provisions. Yes, should be in the contract also, this information. The termination, resignation, and servants provisions. The contract will almost always also include terms regarding confidentiality, non-disclosure requirements, and covenant not to compete. Although some job offer letters for positions such as engineer may include such provisions as well. Okay, in the offer letter, there is a difference between offer letter and the contract. Depending on the position, the employment contract and offer letter may include a relocation provision. The relocation provision, this lays out what the employer is willing to pay the new employee to relocate. For instance, in terms of moving expenses. Okay, clear? This lays out what the employer is willing to pay the new employee to relocate, for instance, moving expenses. State law generally governs enforcement of individual employment contracts, assuming the offer is accepted. The next step is to welcome the employee on board. These are the three points to put in consideration by developing and extending the job offer. And this is all for this chapter, and let's move on to the chapter number 7, which is training and developing the employees. And the next chapter will be training and developing employees. Yes, training and developing employees. And I will explain about this chapter in the next part of today's lecture. That's all for chapter 6, selecting employees. And thank you so much for listening. See you later in the next part of this chapter.